reminisce. Yeah. I reminisce for a spell, or shall I say think back 22 years ago to keep it on track. The birth of a child on the 8th of October. A toast, but my granddaddy came sober.
Welcome, Purple Raiders, to the new Reload podcast. I'm your host, Davis Robey, along with
Riley Sullivan.
And this is a brand new show that we're starting. We got Billy Beebe to go ahead and give us the go-through on this. Actually gave us the idea as well. Just
Producer Billy Beebe.
Producer Billy Beebe, as he now does the play-by-play calls for the football games now. Rip Joe Mertens.
Joe's a good dude, though. Joe's a good dude.
Miss Joe. He was here last weekend. Did you see him?
No, I didn't see him, but I'm sure he'll be back. I think we're going to have some guests this season, and certainly we hope that Joe will be one at one point, so he's quite talented, and hopefully we can get him on. No promises, though.
No promises at all, but it would be very, very, very cool to have Joe Mertens on. The Joe Mertens.
Absolutely. So just an introduction to the podcast. This is what we call the Reload podcast, and the reason it's titled Reload is because Mount Union comes back every year in football, and they reload talent. It always seems to be there, and so we really want to reload this talent and give a tribute to the football team. So we're going to be talking a little bit of Mount Union football, then we're going to cover some football in the OAC.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be great. You think of Mount Union as the Division III version of, Alabama, Clemson. You know, you throw out some big names in college football, so it'll be very, very fun to do this podcast every week, and I'm very excited, so why don't we just get right into it, man?
Yeah, I agree. Let's get right into it. So this weekend on Saturday, Mount Union opened their season with a win 66-14 over Rose-Hulman. Rose-Hulman is from Terre Haute, Indiana, and we saw some good things from the Purple Raiders. Davis, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, so starting out with the quarterback, we had D'Angelo Fulford go for. He threw 22 passes, 16 completed. He had 288 yards in the game, as long as 6 touchdowns. So he looked very, very accurate within the game, and a lot better than he did last year for sure. So what kind of a season are we expecting from him exactly? I mean, it'll be a very good season, of course, but from him specifically.
Yeah, so not everyone knows, but Larry Karras is actually back as the quarterback coach this year, infamous for leading Mount Union to so many championships and really turning our culture around as a football team. And so I think Fulford is really going to grow under him. I think he's already shown that he's grown under him, especially in the passing game. Fulford struggled with accuracy at times last year, missed a few deep balls, a few touch passes, but he really looked sharp in that Rose-Hulman game. So we look to see him keep improving throughout the season because he's got the experience. He started 2 years already.
Yes.
So I really just want to see him get way better.
Yeah, and just to recap on some of the inaccuracies he's had within the past year, specifically against John Hopkins in the semifinal game, when the Purple Raiders played John Hopkins. I already said their name twice. That's cool. Anyways, he threw 3 costly interceptions that almost blew the game for Mount Union. And, they went on and won the game, which was really good.
He showed a lot of maturity in that comeback, too.
He did.
Even though he struggled in the first half, even into the third quarter a little bit, he really showed that he is a talented athlete, and maybe just under the right tutelage, he could be an all-time great in Division III.
And I think he already is shaping up to be like one. I mean, if he finishes with a very strong senior year, he could be one of the best quarterbacks Mount Union's ever had, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
I agree. So let's look further into the offense. Justin Hill had 5 catches for 148 yards and 4 touchdowns this weekend. He spent much of last season as the number 1 wideout while Jared Ruth was injured. How much of an advantage does this experience give him, and what can be expected from him this season?
Well, Riley, I mean, he's already probably the best wide receiver in the OAC, and you could probably make an argument he's the best wide receiver in Division III football. I mean, with Jared Ruth being out last year for most of the season, he gained so much experience being from number 2 wideout to the number 1 wideout. And I am expecting like 20 touchdown receptions this year from him. He already has, 5?
He's got 4 from one game.
Which is crazy. And to think about how Mount Union consistently plays really well against their schedule in general. That, I mean, if he already has 4 and they still have 9 games to go, if he averages like 2-3 a game, 4 or 5 if he's lucky, 20's in reach for sure, maybe even 30.
I know Mount Union added their record boards. I believe there's an electronic record board outside of the locker room.
Is there now?
Outside of the stadium, something along that line.
Well, I know there's the boards right outside the stadium for like track and field records, but I don't know about football records.
Yeah, I think that they can program that to switch it.
Oh, can they?
And by the way his first game looked, Justin Hill has a chance to get on that record board.
Oh, for sure.
Like, this isn't something even Mount Union, comparable to Ohio State or Alabama of Division III, Justin Hill could be up there with the all-time greats here. Pierre Garçon, Cecil Shorts, he can do it. I think he can.
And we could possibly see him make the next jump to the NFL as well if he'd like to. And honestly, I think he can cut it there, man.
I think he could as well. Even Jared Ruth struggled with injuries a little bit. Supremely talented, got invited to the Detroit Lions rookie minicamp. So I think there's a lot of talent on this offense that could end up even at the next level. If not the NFL, the XFL is coming out.
That's true.
So they could get their shot there as well.
And, you know, the XFL is going to be a great platform for those players who just missed out and can vault their career. So
it's an extra opportunity. Hopefully the XFL is everything that the AAF tried to be.
And the old XFL.
Hopefully it's better than the old XFL, yes. I think the TV contracts are kind of favorable. Anyways, back to Mount Union football. So Josh Petroselli posted his 13th 100-yard rushing performance with 149 yards and a touchdown on Saturday. How many 100-yard games do you think we could see this season, Davis?
I mean, considering he's in his junior year right now, and he's played 1 year at varsity, and this is his 13th game with 100 yards rushing, that's insane. So, honestly, this season, why not go with another 12 or another 13? I mean, I think it's very reasonable considering this is his 13th game, and he's already, you know, had 100 yards. So honestly, I don't expect anything less, and I think he's going to be one of the best running backs in the whole country, if not the best running back in the country.
Ideally, Mount Union has a 15-game schedule. 15 games is what takes you to the D3 National Championship. So do you think he could hit half of those games with 100 yards?
Half of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, or a fourth, honestly.
I think he could as well. I know it's really hard to put up that type of production wherever you're at, but Mount Union does have a good offensive line. I don't want to discredit Petroselli, but I do think the offensive line deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, and I honestly, the offensive line doesn't get enough credit, if we're going to be honest. You know, that's like one of the main staples for Mount Union. You know, we may not have the best quarterback play or the best running back play, but we can always trust up on our linemen, whether it's offensive or defensive as well.
I think our line is one of the strongest points of our football team across the board.
Oh, yeah.
Defensive, offensive, that is where Mount Union lives and dies.
If nothing goes right, as long as we can rely on the line, that's really what matters at the end.
Absolutely. So now we're going to take a shift to the defense. This weekend we saw a lot of sophomore Jesse Vale. He impressed on Saturday with 3 tackles and an interception. My question is, how much of him will we see this year? I'm not exactly sure how much he'll see the field. I know historically sophomores at Mount Union, underclassmen, don't see the field a lot, but this kid is talented. He's really good.
Yeah, and with a stat line like that, we could be seeing more of him in the future. If someone goes out with an injury, he's probably the next guy up.
I agree, and he even got playing time as a freshman last year in some of the varsity games, so that tells me that he might be the best freshman from last year's class.
Yeah, or at least one of them. Yes.
At least at the moment being, because he's in there mixing it up with upperclassmen, juniors and seniors, and he's going toe-to-toe with other programs. He's posted the stats, so I think Jesse Vale could see the field a lot this year, especially if he's seeing it already in the first game.
Yeah, and the first game's going to be telling of who's actually going to be playing the whole year. So he's already getting somewhat consistent playing time, so he could be the next Lou Berry possibly. Who knows?
I was just going to say that. I know we have a history of stars at Mount Union, and Lou Berry comes to mind, Gabe Brown, Trevor Cox, all recent graduates. They're still fresh in our memory. Do you think that Jesse Vale is a star in the making for that secondary?
I want to be careful with saying star in the making. Of course, I want to believe in him. I mean, he's a kid in our class. That's impressive. Of course, I want to root for him. But you got to be a little bit slow on that, I guess. I think he'll be a great player this year, and I think he'll develop a lot. And next year could be his really breaking out year. And or this year, you know, if it comes later in the year, he could be a ball hawk. I mean, who knows? But I think there's potential there, but I don't want to say he's a star in the making yet. I want to see a little bit more before I can put a really good gauge on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's very understandable. Personally, I think he's got the foundation for a breakout player for Mount Union, someone that in a year or two is going to be making headlines, almost like a Lou Berry, almost like a Trevor Cox, almost like a Gabe Brown. I agree with your assessment, though. I think it's too early to put a stamp on it, but the potential is certainly there. So leading into the final point of Mount Union's game on Saturday, away at Rose-Hulman. Rose-Hulman scored on plays of 60 yards and 68 yards, which is concerning because those are certainly big plays. They couldn't get anything going otherwise. And so my question is, how will Mount Union slow down teams in the OAC and limit big plays this season?
And honestly, I think it just comes with our secondary. I mean, we're starting 4 new guys up there, and it's concerning in the first game, but as the season progresses, you hope those guys get better and get better with their reads, and sometimes it's just a reactionary thing too. He might be on him, but he reacted too slow. So I think that it's okay to have these big plays early in the season, especially since the competition isn't very high at all. And sorry to say that, Rose-Hulman, but he didn't play too well. And
they are a solid team in their conference.
They're solid in their conference, but obviously against Mount Union they couldn't hold up the ground, so
they probably wouldn't do very well in the OAC.
No, but to limit the big plays, I think it just takes time. So that's all I really gotta say.
I agree. I think that early in the season it's okay to let up these big plays, but you have to contain it as fast as you can, because if not, it's just a grease fire, it's a stove fire. If you don't get it contained, it's going to keep going. So I believe it's really a problem, like you said, on timing and just inexperience, like not enough reps versus other teams. You don't know what other teams are going to throw at you. Now everyone's got film out. Everyone's played their first game this year, so you can see what they might be throwing at you, whereas you couldn't before the Rose-Hulman game for Mount Union. Now we're going to travel around the OAC. We covered Mount Union football a little bit, but this podcast is more. We want it to be more. We want to cover the OAC. We want to give coverage to as many teams as we can, because this is really what it's all about. This is what college football is about.
Yeah, and we hear the all same thing. Oh, Mount Union, but there's actually some other quality teams in the OAC. That's the thing. There's some teams that can possibly challenge Mount Union this year, and why not cover them? Why not give them the spotlight for a little bit? It's fun.
There are players that the people just need to know about. Like the saying is, any given Sunday. In this case, it's Saturday, but on any given Sunday, these players from other teams who are absolutely talented could take over, and that's something that we need to cover. So going into the OAC, we're going to look at some scores here. This past Saturday, Capital played Westminster, PA.
It was actually Thursday.
Was it Thursday?
Thursday. That's the only game that was played Thursday.
That was a Thursday game.
Other ones were played Saturday.
So Capital played Westminster on Thursday. It was a rough game, but we know that Capital's a young team. They're a building team. They're trying to make their name in the OAC. They lost 7-66. Baldwin Wallace defeated Alma 31-14. Muskingum defeated Waynesburg 31-20. John Carroll 21. Wisconsin Stevens Point 7. Otterbein lost a close game to Ohio Wesleyan 22-10. Heidelberg had an impressive showing.
Yeah, very impressive.
57-7 win against Adrian. Marietta, another impressive showing, and we saw some growth from them last year. They won 41-0 against Hiram. Ohio Northern lost to the Denison Big Red, Mount Union's first round playoff opponent.
Which honestly, it's expected when a team that made the playoffs comes up to a lower team in the OAC and smacks up on them. So it's nothing new.
Denison is a very talented
good team.
And don't discredit their loss to Mount Union in the playoffs last year, because Mount Union, that is where they come alive.
Yep.
The playoffs is their playground. And so Denison, to go toe-to-toe with Mount Union last year in the playoffs, impressive. Mount Union, of course, we said, they won 66-14 over Rose-Hulman. And finally, Wilmington lost a very, very close game to Olivet, 20-17. We're going to explore some of these games a little bit further in depth. First, we're going to start with Baldwin Wallace. Baldwin Wallace was led by A.J. Miller. He threw for 346 yards and 2 touchdowns against Alma. Davis, you want to cover the leading receiver?
Yeah, leading receiver, Ian Mitchell, caught 6 passes for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this potentially could be some big threats. As we already covered, Mount Union couldn't really stop down the big plays in the game against Rose-Hulman.
Yeah, they struggled in that area. That's where Rose-Hulman got all their points. And analyzing this Baldwin Wallace game a little bit further, they had a steady rushing attack, but they also had some big plays led by their quarterback and their wide receiver. So Baldwin Wallace certainly could be talented this year. They could definitely hit the big plays. And so that's something that we have to be careful for. That's something Mount Union has to look out for. And that's something that every team in the OAC needs to look out for.
Yeah, they had a total of 452 yards in that game. So that's pretty concerning. If Mount Union can't stop the big plays, then it obviously, hopefully it won't be 452 yards, but I mean, it's still going to be a very good game.
And I believe that Baldwin Wallace is Mount Union's next opponent, correct? Is that
yeah,
correct?
they are, yeah. September 21st and Mount.
September 21st at Mount.
It's the first game of the season. It's going to be hype. It's going to be a really good one.
Yeah, so make sure you're watching that game. There's always been this quasi rivalry between Baldwin Wallace and Mount Union.
I think it's more of no offense to Baldwin Wallace, but I think it's more of a Baldwin Wallace thing than it is a Mount Union thing.
They are passionate about football, though,
I know.
Just as we are. So I don't discredit them at all for that. They're an excellent school. They put out the best football teams that they can, and man, they play for their fans.
Yeah, they do.
They do. And so Baldwin Wallace looking very good in their first game. They're a team to keep your eye out for. The next team is a team that intrigues me to no end. They're a team that came to Mount Union last year. I'm pretty sure they finished around 500, but they had some really good players that just posted crazy stat lines against Mount Union, and that team is Heidelberg. So Heidelberg had a dominant win in week 1. It wasn't even close. They won 57-7, like I said, against Adrian College, and quarterback Jimmy Gephardt exploded for 330 passing yards and 6 touchdowns. His 6 touchdowns matched D'Angelo Fulford's 6 touchdowns. That's the high in the OAC right now. They relied on running back Brandon Short. He carried the ball for 113 yards on the day, and wide receiver Kevon Belcher caught 8 passes for 103 yards. So their offense is certainly looking like it's got firepower.
Yeah, definitely. And, Riley and I were talking about this earlier. This could be a really good matchup for Mount Union towards the middle, or I think they play on middle or end of the season, where if Heidelberg continues this, they could be ranked pretty decently high. And it could end up being a really good game that Mount Union has to play. And you know what? That just makes the season even better.
And I think that Heidelberg is the underdog team in the OAC. Last year, they came to Mount Union. It wasn't a close game, but their younger players showed a ton of promise. And then in this season opener, I think they expanded on that promise. Most notably, last year, put up a huge game against us. Linebacker Zach Blackiston. He was named first team OAC as a freshman, and he's looking to improve as a sophomore, and I certainly think that he can.
Yeah, I think probably the goal for him this year is to be an All-American, honestly, throughout Division III football. And if he's already made first team All-OAC as a freshman, there's definitely room for him to be an All-American during his sophomore year and the 2 years after.
Mm-hmm. And last year, when they played against Mount Union, Heidelberg did, Zach Blackiston lit up the stat sheet. I can't remember the exact stats off the top of my head, but I remember saying in our post-game show, I think Zach Blackiston has All-American talent, and I think that's absolutely true. He looked strong in week 1, and I think he's just going to keep expanding on that. And then my big question with Heidelberg, because they intrigue me, like I said, beyond no end. Can Heidelberg be this year's Marietta, surprisingly undefeated at midseason?
If they play the way they do, yeah. I don't discredit them at all. I think if they keep putting up the stats and they keep putting up the solid defense, there should be no question. I think it's a very good possibility, and I'd travel to watch this game. I mean, if Mount Union and Heidelberg are both undefeated, I don't know where Heidelberg is exactly, but I'm not from Northeast Ohio, but honestly, I don't care how far away it is. I want to watch this game.
I know Marietta, we're kind of saying, is Heidelberg going to be this season's Marietta? To put some context to that, Marietta started the season undefeated, I think, through 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, I think it was through 6.
I think it was through 6 as well, and they ended up finishing 7-3, barely missing the playoffs. Yeah. They were ranked at one point. Normally, it's like Mount Union, Baldwin Wallace, John Carroll that are ranked in the top 25, and Marietta was there.
I think Marietta was like 22 at one point.
I think you're correct. They definitely broke the top 25.
Yes.
Which showed growth for the OAC, and especially Marietta. And I think Heidelberg has that type of potential with their young defense, absolutely talented. Their quarterback who just threw 6 touchdowns, 330 yards in one game. There's so much potential behind that team. And win or lose when they play Mount Union, I am excited to watch them. And moving on, we're going to look at one final team, Mount Union's arch rival in the OAC, John Carroll. Davis, you want to take that away?
Yeah, so Riley recapped it earlier, but just a reminder that they played Wisconsin Stevens Point, and they won 21-7. They played at home, University Heights, and the defense looked very well with 8 total sacks, which is a very good number, and 11 total tackles for loss. So their defense looks phenomenal right now.
Their defense even tore up Mount Union a little bit.
And that's why Mount Union struggled against them mostly. You know, our defenses kept trading throughout that whole game.
Yes.
It was stop. I mean, the only reason we broke away was because of a defensive play by Lou Berry, who stripped the ball and took it all to the end zone. SC top 10, by the way.
Probably one of the most famous plays in Mount
if
Union
not
history.
the most famous play in Mount Union history. And then the offense ran the ball very consistently, but only managed 109 yards. Granted, they're starting a new quarterback this year.
109 passing yards, yeah.
109 passing yards, I apologize. They are starting a new quarterback this year after their previous one graduated. Meglin.
Yeah.
But the real question is can John Carroll really hold up to their number 17th ranking, even with this new quarterback starting?
I think that John Carroll can, definitely. Their defense is always one of the best defenses in the country. Right up there with Mount Union, Mary Hardin-Baylor even. They have a great defense now. So I think, in my opinion, that John Carroll can live up to this ranking. And I think that they might even be able to climb. But that first game passing is concerning. Meglin was fantastic. He made plays in the Mount Union game last year that most players in this country could not. And so I think that hurts John Carroll. This is a new quarterback, not as much experience. He went to Menor. I can't remember his name. He went to Menor.
Jake Floria.
And so he's an Ohio kid. I think he's talented, but maybe it's too much at once.
Well, you know, we see all these quarterbacks come in on the D1 level who are just starting, and of course they're going to do decent against teams, and you know, it's his first game as a start. So I think it's probably just nerves most of all, and if he can keep progressing through this, I think the John Carroll Mount Union game is going to be another classic.
I think no matter what, that game is always going to be competitive.
That's true, yeah.
Just because of the bad blood between both teams, the passion is there, the fans are there, everyone wants to see it, and so no matter what, I think that's going to be a fantastic game this year. Mount Union's next game is against Baldwin-Wallace, like we said, 1:30 p.m., Saturday the 21st of September in Mount Union Stadium. Please stay tuned with that. Follow up. We'll have a short show next week probably on the other OAC
since
teams.
They're not playing this Saturday, we'll probably have a shorter one. But do you want to go through the other teams in the OAC and predict if who's gonna win, who's gonna lose?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So you just want to start out Heidelberg-Wilmington. It's being played at Heidelberg. You got a prediction?
I think Heidelberg's gonna take it and take it handedly. Like I said, Heidelberg, I think, is one of my favorite teams in the OAC outside of Mount Union.
Of course.
At least story-wise, what can they be? Because they're just this anomaly, kind of.
Yeah.
We don't know what they're going to be, but I think they're going to be very good. I could be wrong. I could be right. But they have a story.
I don't know, Riley. Your predictions are pretty spot on most of the time. So
I wouldn't say that. They aren't always spot on.
If I'm going to predict a score, you know, Wilmington's a okay team in the OAC. I wouldn't say they're good, but I wouldn't say they're terrible. I'm just going to go ahead and say Heidelberg's going to put up 52 points, and then Wilmington's going to score like 14. I think 2 touchdowns would probably be good for Wilmington.
I think Heidelberg could also hang up 6 or 7 touchdowns for the day, but Wilmington, this is an OAC team. There might be a little bit more behind them. I think that they can score 14 or 21 points probably once it's garbage time, like once Heidelberg puts in some backups. Next, Ohio Northern, Muskingum. What do you think?
I don't know what to think about this one because both these teams last year in the OAC, Ohio Northern wasn't as good as Muskingum, but Muskingum was probably around 500. So I don't know. I think this might be a competitive game. So I'll probably go 24-17 Muskingum.
See, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think Ohio Northern, coming off a rough loss, has a lot of potential to grow, especially since it was against a playoff team last year. That's a team that knows how to win. I think Ohio Northern takes it 28-21.
So next we got Baldwin-Wallace at Otterbein. I mean, we both know that Otterbein was not a very good team last year in the OAC, if we're going to be honest. They won, like 2 games?
Yes, but remember, last season doesn't always mean
I know
what's going to happen this season.
That's true, but, I mean, what was the score for that last game they had? They lost? Oh, yeah, it was a close game. somewhat close game against Ohio Wesleyan. So with that being said, it might be Baldwin Wallace will probably take care of business.
I believe so too. I think Baldwin Wallace is another team that had a strong week 1, and they're looking to just prove it. You've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. So I think Baldwin Wallace will take it 49-14. 49-7, somewhere around there. The last game played next week will be Marietta at Capital. What do you think is going to happen there?
Capital did not look good at all in their first game. They
a lot to grow on.
Yeah,
a lot to build on.
A lot to build on, but I don't really see that happening. Even if it's being played at Capital, I think Marietta is going to win it pretty handedly.
I agree. I think Marietta had a great season last year. Not sure how many starters they lost, but they've got a good thing going there. So Marietta, I say they take it against Capital, probably 56-7. And that really concludes next week's games. That concludes what happened this week.
Yeah.
Please always stay tuned. Listen in to 91.1 WRMU. I'd like to thank producer Billy Beebe again and 91.1 WRMU Sports giving us the chance to host this podcast. This was a great first podcast. We hope you keep listening, and take it easy, Raiders.